Hi, I am so excited today because I have, one of the most distinguished national experts on student success innovation in the country. He's a longtime guest of the show and someone who has been involved in our work for a long time. So, really excited to check in with Dr. Tim Renick from Georgia State University, who is the executive vice president for student success.
Senior vice president.
President, the greatest vice president in America. I know. No, your title changes a lot. Folks at home, you should be familiar with Tim. If you aren't, then we have a whole catalog of his work, which has definitely informed much of the Alliance's work. And he's someone who has figured out how to run an institution that is designed really shifting from being otherwise centered to student-centered. And most people know that Georgia State has eliminated race and income as a predictor of outcome, the first in the country to do that through this kind of really intentional step-by-step analytics, data, really focusing on the evidence. And what I want to talk to you about, Tim, is what are you learning right now? And what has this been like to shift this highly analytics informed enterprise in the midst of COVID? So that's the general theme I'd love to talk to you about. But first, how are you hanging in there? How are you doing?
Good to see you, Bridget. It's a pleasure to talk with you. And yeah, we're doing better than we might have feared. So I guess that's as positive as I can be. We have taken an enrollment this spring of 50,000 students and converted on a dime to entirely online delivery. And the engagement is encouraging. So about 98% of our bachelor students are logging on every week onto their classes. And that's better than we had feared as we faced this situation. But it's been unlike any period in my career, and I've been in higher education over 30 years. And I think everybody you talk to will say exactly the same thing.
I agree. Yeah. So, I think one of the things that we always talk about is, following listening to students, paying attention to their behavior and trying to adapt how the institution was previously set up around that. To do that, you monitor a lot. You monitor at least 800 indicators on a daily basis of student interaction and what they do. And you knew what the top 10 indicators a student was about to drop out were, probably before most campuses in the country. But I'm curious about what has changed about those top 10 indicators, and what are you flexing in terms of how you look at the data, given that we're now in this remote world?
Yeah, I think my first observation is that a lot of the prep we've done at Georgia State and through the University Innovation Alliance in recent years has been very useful under these circumstances. I mean, the problem we faced at Georgia State with a student body that is almost 75% non-white, 60% Pell eligible, is trying to deliver personalized services at scale to a student body that often cannot meet with us face to face. So it's not, the last 2 weeks, it's been the last 10 years where we've been trying to innovate in ways that deliver services to students remotely. These are students who 85% of our undergraduates have jobs. Many of them have families. It's complicated and it's difficult to be in one place at one time and meet with somebody face to face. So what we've done in advising over the last really 8 years has been entirely applicable to the current moment. Those 800 risk factors you were referring to, we're tracking every student, and not waiting for them to come into an office and speak to us, but looking at data-based indicators of whether a student has gotten off path. Well, that is completely transferable to the current moment. We have added indicators over the last couple of weeks. We're now tracking every student every day for their logons in various sorts of ways. Are they logging on to our online platform, our learning management system? Are they logging on to other sorts of systems that we have at Georgia State? And we've set up alerts that go directly to our academic advisors when a student is failing to log on. The first 2 weeks we were live with our online only operations, we had over 3,500 alerts triggered to our academic advisors, and every one of those students was contacted. What's going on? Is there a technology issue? Are you having difficulty with Wi-Fi access? Are you not engaged? Do you not understand what your instructors are expecting you to do? Or are you just overwhelmed for other things going on in your life, health issues, job issues, financial issues, and so forth? And so, in a sense, the new moment has been very, very different in the past. In another sense, we've kind of made a seamless transition where these technologies that we and the University Innovation Alliance have invested in are exactly the kind of technologies we need in this moment where face-to-face meetings no longer can occur. For really a generation, the model in academic advising in higher education was wait for a student to self-identify they have a problem and wait for them to come in and see somebody face-to-face in some office, and then we'll get to trying to help the student. Well, Georgia State and much of the University Innovation Alliance has moved well beyond that model years ago. Our model is let's try to find out, in many cases before the student understands they're facing a problem, what that problem is. Let's reach out to them proactively, and let's not rely on face-to-face meetings. Let's use video conferencing and other tools, texting and so forth, to have those exchanges. In the first 2 weeks we've been live with our entirely online operations, we've had over 8,000 meetings between our advisors and students, all virtually, most of them via video conferencing.
I was just writing trying to write a banner about 8,000 indicators. Wow. That or 8,000 meetings, and those are just on Zoom. And you're
well, we're using different technology. We're WebEx and so forth, but yes, it's that sort of approach. And of course, embedded in some of the platforms we already have been using, like EAB, are all kinds of tools that we can use in that respect. And what has been striking is it's not just been in academic advising, which is an area where Georgia State has been well known, but in other spaces as well. When the governor of Georgia announced that basically we were going to be closing down face-to-face operations for students across our state schools, we were given a very short period of time to determine which students were going to be able to move out of university housing. We've got about 5,500 students in housing this spring, and which students, because of their circumstances, had to stay. And of course, for our student body, that's a significant number. For many of the students who enroll at Georgia State, they don't have, a home to go home to. Their investment for the spring semester in living expenses was in being able to afford a dorm room and so forth. So we used our chatbot. We have this tool where students can interact with Pounce, our school mascot, our AI enhanced platform, to try to figure out which students were going to have to stay and which students would leave. The average email we send a Georgia State student, we actually look at open rates, how many students even open the email in a 24-hour period. And an average open rate is about 20%. So you're only getting 20% of the students. This is not even getting them to engage, just getting them to open the email. We sent a chatbot message out to all the students in university housing the day we were told by the state that we were having to change operations. Within 10 minutes, we had the answers of about 40% of the students. They had told us, no, I can't leave, or yes, I can leave, and so forth. So these kind of tools, again, were developed at a time when the COVID situation was not even anywhere on the horizon. But you think about it, okay, how do we communicate in a bi-directional fashion with students, so we're not just talking at them, but they're able to respond and give us information and so forth, and do it in a quick fashion? The chatbot has been critical. And what's interesting about these first two examples we're talking about today is one of the big scale projects of the University Innovation Alliance was scaling predictive analytics and proactive advising across all of the UIA campuses. A project we're currently engaged with is trying to take the chatbot and see how it applies to each of the 11 institutions and scaling it. These are exactly the kind of tools that work well for underserved students who are low income, first generation, working students, and so forth. We've developed them across the Alliance for those particular students, but they are now the need of every student, right? They're exactly what every student needs in order to I'd like to say be successful, but even manage the current time period.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was thinking about that the other day in terms of while we were building all of these things and working on them and scaling them during a simpler time, I'm now seeing that the resistance that we ran into on certain campuses all of a sudden is not there, right? So some campuses who really struggled with analytics, any of the excuses, I would say, that were reasons why it couldn't be successful inside, those are gone. And now it's a matter of, wow, I wish we'd built this during a calmer time, because now it's going to have to happen right away. The advising part in particular, that our MAPS advisors were all, I mean, a lot of them were virtual,
Yes.
right? So they understand how to do virtual advising at each of our campuses and can give a sense of what the obstacles are and what the modalities and what strategies to use. The other one that we scaled, completion grants, while it's not seeming, entirely topical at the moment, it actually is, because we just raised $350,000 for our campuses to deploy in emergency grants. Thank you to Course Hero and to ECMC Foundation. And it was very quick. We were able to execute some of those MOUs within 24 hours, and that would have never happened. But we already had built out the relationships, and we figured out how we were going to do that kind of a financial transfer for financial aid deployment through the completion grant work. And then chatbots, we're seeing. I saw an article about our team at Iowa State using theirs for COVID, and then of course we're seeing quite a bit of use of chatbots around the topic of COVID, but. Yeah, it feels strange that these were so prescient at the time, like in terms of looking back. So thank you to the role you played in kind of leading us down that path.
Well, let me mention even a stronger connection with the completion grants, which is, the completion grant model was a different way of distributing financial aid. Typically, students in financial aid have to fill out applications for scholarships and loans and so forth. They come in and state into each individual case. And what the completion grants did was scale the delivery of micro grants to students at critical moments in their academic careers by, again, taking the pressure off the students to self-identify and using data to identify the students who were in need. So Georgia State has had the Panther Retention Grant Program now for over 7 years. We've given 17,000 of these grants out, more than 1,000 every semester, not because we sit back and wait for the students to self-identify, but because we're looking at the data for students who are about to get dropped for financial reasons or have major holds, and their progression is going to be held up. And again, that is exactly what is needed in this precise moment, that approach to not waiting for students to come into some office and fill out a form, but using the data to proactively deliver support for students. The CARES Act, for instance, has mandated, it's given many of our institutions millions of dollars of emergency aid, but it's mandated that we distribute this money quickly and get it in the hands of the students within a couple weeks. There's no way to do that by an application process, right? In this moment, if you're, a big university like the UIA schools with 30, 40, 50, 60,000 students, there's no way you can distribute millions of dollars of aid by having students fill out some form and having somebody review the forms and then make some decision upon it. What we're needing at this moment is exactly what the completion grant program developed, which is a way of looking via the data at the students who are most needy and proactively delivering the money to them. So we've just signed a document with our state of Georgia laying out our plans for distributing emergency aid. And over a 3 or 4 day period, we will distribute 25,000 grants to Georgia State students currently enrolled this spring, in part by that data-based approach. We were already, even before the CARES Act money comes in, awarding about 500 of these grants every couple weeks, based upon our ability to interact quickly with the students and be as proactive as possible.
That's great. So the last question I have is really about this online pivot, in that this is not a space where, I don't know what Georgia State's presence online was prior, but obviously not where it is today. What are you seeing as far as challenges that need a solution as you're pivoting and thinking about, the possibility of fall term, but in general, if just for right now in this moment, what solutions are you, or what problem areas? I'm thinking about how you have used your intuitive approach to deduce the challenges at Georgia State and implement these solutions. I'm seeing are there some very obvious areas where we need additional support, or you need additional support, that you're already thinking about for fall term, or for, if this were to extend.
Yeah, so the numbers are as follows: that we, prior to the last couple of weeks, had about 3,000 students who were entirely online, and then we moved almost overnight to 50,000 students. And I think from a student success perspective, one of the issues we're working through right now is the difference between what's practical in online delivery and what's needed for underserved student populations. What's practical is asynchronous delivery, right? That because students don't always have the best technology and don't have the best Wi-Fi access, you can't assume that in a class with 75 students, or in some cases 250 students, all the students can be virtually in the same place at the same time. And you can't assume if a student doesn't successfully log in, too bad, it's the same as if you didn't attend the class, and therefore you've lost all that material and probably not going to do very well on the next exam. So our courses are predominantly asynchronous, where the material is up there, students can access it 24/7, they can do it over multiple days and so forth. But you think back to some of the signature programs that we've developed in student success, they're highly intensive personal experiences where part of the goal is team building, mindset, building a sense of identity. Our Summer Success Academy, which was one of our signature programs, gets students who otherwise would not likely succeed in college and puts them in a 7-week program where they're doing field trips and they're doing treasure hunts across campus, and anything we can do to get them to feel a sense of identity and belonging to campus. Well, what does that look like under the current moment? We are going to offer our Summer Success Academy this summer, but we also have been instructed by the state of Georgia that all learning will be 100% virtual. So how do you build that sense of belonging in those sorts of settings? We're already thinking through little things like sending all the students t-shirts in advance and getting them to wear the t-shirts in the event. But we're also working with our faculty to develop synchronous experiences and synchronous courses for at least those students, because otherwise we fear that anything that could be gained from that kind of experience will not translate well into the online environment. So there's lots of things we've done via technology over the last 10 years at Georgia State, but there's lots we've done with learning communities and with the Summer Success Academy and with supplemental instruction and so forth, where part of the power is that interaction, one-on-one, or one student to a larger group. And we're working very hard to try to find creative ways to capture that and preserve that, so that the students don't end up, losing out. You opened up the session by introducing Georgia State. One of our most distinctive traits is race, ethnicity, and income level no longer predict which students are successful. And I would consider it to be a great loss at this moment if we lose that and go back to a period where equity gaps become the norm. And so we're really working with our partners, including the University Innovation Alliance, to try to find ways to make sure that that does not happen.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge for us all this moment is how do we innovate and adapt to the moment, but not lose ground on equity. And I think that your finger's on the right issue, which is creating community and belonging online. That's the thing. Every student that we're interviewing, it is the thing that they notice the most significant difference. Like they can have, complaints about the modality or, this or that, but it is consistent in every interview that it just feels different and that they miss that element, that learning community aspect. So I do think that it's something that is worthy of all of our heads being brought together. I don't think any one institution is going to be able to solve this. And it's definitely something that we're going to be focusing on over the next few months. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. Folks who are at home, if you want to connect with Georgia State and learn more about what they're doing, they actually have a really comprehensive website that we'll share with you. It's their hashtag, the State Way, but I've already linked Georgia State and Tim in the in the heading on Twitter, but if on Facebook, you can go over to Georgia State's Facebook page as well. So I assume that we will likely do this again, and I look forward to checking in with you and sharing more of what you're unpacking in this moment of how to adapt this really intentional and student-focused way of running an institution in the midst of the pandemic. So thank you, Tim, as always, for sharing with us.
Great talking with you, Bridget. Thanks for all you're doing nationally to keep the conversation going and to support our students.
It's tremendous privilege for me. So I will talk to you later.
Very good.